As we have done throughout the pandemic, we have turned to Dr. Volker Gerdts in Saskatoon. He's the director and CEO at Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, International Vaccine Center. That's where the VIDO Intervac comes from, who has been leading that operation, but also looking very much toward the future and creating new vaccines in his own facilities. So welcome, Dr. Gerdts. It's great to see you again. Tell us where things stand. What are you doing there and how are the trials going?
Yeah, so the trials are going very well. They are, as you know, they're being held in Dalhousie right now. And in fact, we're opening now a second site here in Saskatoon. It's quite amazing, actually, as we are seeing a little bit of difficulties in finding volunteers in Halifax. We have had lots and lots of people here in Saskatchewan calling and saying they'd like to be part of these trials. And so we're opening a second site here in Saskatoon. We already reported the results from the phase 1 trial, the first interim results that were coming. And so the vaccine, as expected, is safe. And it's also inducing very good immune responses in the volunteers that have received it. So it's looking very, very promising.
So again, give us a timeline on this. I mean, this is a long process.
It is. And, you want to get it right? So we want to make sure the vaccine is safe. As I explained before, this is a vaccine that differs from some of the existing technologies like the RNA vaccines, for example. It's what we call a protein subunit vaccine. That's a technology that has been in use in humans for decades now. We all have received protein subunit vaccines. We give it to our children on a daily basis. So what we're doing right now is making a vaccine that also will address some of these variants of concern. So really building a vaccine that will be useful in the future and will allow us to do, for example, these annual or maybe biannual boosts that we have to do with it for COVID-19.
Okay, do you think that is going to be a must? I mean, we're already seeing the FDA and others say we need a third shot for those that are immunocompromised. Do you think that's just a precursor?
Well, so I think, let me start from a different angle. I think number one, we need to get everyone vaccinated. And it's very frustrating to see that we still have so many people who are on the fence, whether they want to get vaccinated or not. If we want to get these variants under control, if we want to make sure that in the future we're not seeing new variants for which we have no vaccine, the best thing we can do is for everyone to get vaccinated. So that's number one. And I think the data now is coming out, even for the new Delta variant, if you have received 2 immunizations, so fully protected, you are also protected against the Delta variant. For those who had them a long time ago, or maybe have some other underlying conditions, like you said, a third dose might be a good way of giving you that extra little protection that you may need for the Delta variant. But if we think about all of Saskatchewan, all of Canada, the best we can do is to get as many people vaccinated now as possible. And then it's really the question, so how often do we have to vaccinate in the future? I think the data on that, the verdict on that is still out, but I would think that maybe, I don't know, at least every 2 years, maybe every year, we will need a boost for this. And this could be combined, for example, like our vaccine could be combined with the annual flu shot that you're getting. And so then you would have an annual flu shot combined with a COVID shot. And so, you just get your update every year. And it allows us also to continue to monitor these variants and adjust the vaccine as needed in the future.
All right, you're probably smarter than this, but if you spend any amount of time online, you are starting to see a whole discussion coming up about people who are double vaccinated, who are still becoming ill. The numbers on the children are changing, and they seem to be more susceptible to Delta or some strains of the Delta. We're very conflicting information on how long these vaccines remain tough, and even questions about whether, if you've had COVID, how long your natural immunity will last. How and when do you think we'll be able to answer some of those questions?
So I think there's already some data for some of those questions out there. My quick summary would be, and I kind of differ a little bit with what you said, I think the vaccines are protecting us very well right now from severe clinical disease. And that was the main objective for these vaccines. That's why they were so quickly developed. Early on, we knew that many of these new technologies are not completely controlling the infection in the respiratory tract. So that means there is a little bit of virus still circulating left in the lungs that can be transmitted to other individuals. And so it was never said that the vaccine would completely prevent any transmission. And I think that's a point that, that people just assume that that was the case, but it's actually the vaccine have never claimed that. And our vaccine, to just on the side here, our data would indicate that we actually control the infection in the respiratory tract very well. So we could maybe make that claim that we see reduced transmission. But for many of the existing vaccines, the main target was to reduce disease, the severity of the disease. And I think the data—
And reduce the death.
That's right, death and severe disease. And I think the data is very, very clear on that. They clearly do it. What they don't do is completely stop any viral replication and transmission to other people. So there remains a chance that as a vaccinated father of 3 children, that I can potentially infect my children at home, although personally I'm not getting sick, which is why I'm still wearing masks, for example, in stores and so on. And again, this is just another reason that we need to get more people vaccinated so that we push these new variants out of our population. We reduce the risk for all of us, right? And so I think so now your question about how long does natural immunity last? Well, it differs. I think a part of the immune system, the so-called T cells, so in a special immune population, they last for a very, very long time. We know that. The antibodies that we can measure in people's blood, in the serum, don't last as long. And so what we don't know right now is how well are you protected if you had an infection, let's say last year with the original strain, how well are you not protected against some of these variants? But again, the same recommendation here is get vaccinated. Even if you have been naturally exposed, we see that the vaccine-induced immune response is even stronger than the natural infection or the immune response that you got after natural infection.
So even if you had COVID, you're saying go and get a double shot, or at least
go get vaccinated. Go get vaccinated. I mean, we've been saying this consistently for a very, very, very long time now. The vaccine induces very strong immune responses. And even if you were infected before, we're just boosting them. We're just bringing them up again. But there's no disadvantage or anything. But what it does, it gives you a fresh start if you want. And so your protection then again lasts longer from it.
We will need time to figure out if there are long-term effects from this, or are you just confident that really it's something we can manage within our systems?
So long-term effects from vaccines?
Yeah.
So like right now, again, the same thing, there is really no data, no significant data that would indicate that any of the vaccines have any long-term effects. The safety of all of these vaccines has been demonstrated in the regular process. There haven't been any shortcuts or corners cut on this. And, from the millions and millions and millions of people that we have now vaccinated around the world, overall, what we're seeing that there is no unusual adverse reactions to any of the vaccines anywhere in the world right now.
So people that are getting sick have some other comorbidity or some other condition.
Yeah, and even if you look at some of these cases where people are reporting that they are getting sick, I mean, it's not associated with the vaccine, it's associated with other events, right? And so, again, there's unfortunately, in my mind, so much false information in the media right now where people anecdotally, tell stories about, I don't know, I don't even want to start it, but
no, exactly.
The overall data is clear that there is no no increased side effects or any long-term consequences to any of the vaccines. In fact, what we don't talk about enough is the risk of COVID-19 itself causing long-term effects. We call this long-haul COVID-19. And the data is becoming more and more clear. If you look at, there are some of these stories that you hear from people and so on, and that are being reported. The consequences can be long, 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 and very devastating. And so again, people are more concerned right now about the vaccine consequences when the chances of getting COVID long-term consequences are so much higher.
Yeah. And I think when we were talking about the whole issue of messaging, we have way too many politicians and government leaders involved in this. I mean, part of the problem was they said, get double vaccinated and then you can take your mask off and you'll be free. So once again, there has to be a change of the storyline here, which is you, and certainly I still do it too. When I go into a store or a larger gathering, I wear my mask. So it's
the point here, the story is, if we all would have gotten vaccinated, we could have taken our mask off. The reason why you and I can't take our mask off, because there is still a significant risk that we can carry or, contract the virus and then shed it. If everybody would have been vaccinated, there wouldn't be any virus circulating anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, again, it's like it's what we want to accomplish. So the goal was to get everybody vaccinated. And if we do, we're out of this pandemic. And unfortunately, we're finding ourselves in a situation now where, a good portion of the population decides not to do it. And they are the ones that now forcing everybody else to go back to the mask, go back to the distancing, hopefully not, but maybe go back to online schooling and all those things again, or virtual schooling, because we can't get the virus pushed out of the population.
I read this article. I can't remember where it was. I think it might have been Maclean's. The typical vaccine hesitant person is not the media stereotype or what people are suggesting. It says that the typical vaccine hesitant person is a 42-year-old Ontario woman who votes Liberal. Now, that does not meet the stereotype. So why would 40-year-old women with progressive views be so concerned?
Yeah, so I don't really know the data there. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise, so I can't really comment on that. But I think what we're seeing with the vaccine hesitant people is that those are maybe the people that do a lot of, or trying to do a lot of their own research, and so they're not really relying or trusting people like myself and saying, oh, no, I'll figure this out myself, and then use things like Facebook and so on for their research. And I think this is where we're getting really into this problem of misinformation. As soon as things are being politicized for whatever reason, or made sensational so that you get more hits or likes or whatever it is the what's the right term here? It's the sensational aspect of these stories that attracts people to read it, right? So another person coming up with these major severe effects and not clear if it's associated or not. Well, everybody reads that rather than reading the data and saying 10 million people protected from the disease. Like, that's the problem we all have with dealing with, anti-vaxxers and hesitant people. The good news is that we protected millions and millions and millions of people, right?
Yeah.
But that's not sexy. That's not what people want to hear. What people are focused on is this one person somewhere where there was a complication. The complication is not even proven. So the 10 million or 100 million people, it doesn't mean anything. It's the one individual story that seems to sway people's opinion on things.
What do we need to do to get to this elusive herd immunity? Because our numbers in this country are really pretty good in terms of uptake, 70+%, I think now. And then that doesn't account for people who have some natural immunity as well, or babies. So what's it going to take?
Well, herd immunity, the problem with herd immunity, and it's not a problem, but herd immunity is specific for the pathogen we're talking about, right? So this COVID came out in the beginning, and based on the transmission rate at that time, we predicted that, you need to have a level of 75 or whatever it is. And that is based on that one person only infects so many people. And so the concept between herd immunity is you have enough people that are vaccinated, and so it's almost impossible for the virus to spread. Well, now we're facing a new variant, the Delta variant, and now there's even a new one coming out of South America that might transmit more effectively than the original one.
Is that the
case? Yeah, so if that's the case, now you have to have even higher levels of herd immunity, because the virus is if you want, in very plain language, is able to actually reach even more people or get to them easier than some of the other ones. And so that's the problem again, because we're now seeing this new variant and we're not getting them under control because people are not getting vaccinated. Well, then the chances that we have more variants coming up, and with more variants coming up, we will see variants that are easier or better in finding the people that aren't vaccinated, so they transmit easier, and they may cause more disease. So for that, we even have to have higher levels of herd immunity to effectively control this. So it's almost like a spiral that keeps going on and on. And the only solution that gets us out of this is get everybody vaccinated now.
Okay, so the chances of that are slim, that you're going to get absolutely everybody. So we have to come, and we saw some moves in Alberta and then some moves back the other way, which is we're going to have to learn to live with this in some way, shape, or form. And as long as people aren't dying in huge numbers, then we've got to figure out a way, as you say, with your vaccine, put it in with the flu vaccine every year and just keep boosting us. Is that ultimately what we have to accept?
That's a hard question. So I think, again, it's all about to what level will we get, right? So it's coming back to the argument that I just made before. And if we look to the US, for example, I mean, we can see, what is it, 8 states now, where we're almost back to the original levels, right? I mean, it's getting out of control there. So the problem is, again, if we have a significant number of people that aren't vaccinated, we will have a significant chance for the virus to keep circulating within the population. And what that means is that we will see new variants coming up in the future. And that requires all of us to get updated on our vaccines all the time. And unfortunately, it may also require us to keep wearing masks for a long time, or at least indoors, or at least in offices and so on. And so it all comes back to how many people, or what's the size of the reservoir for the virus in which it can continue to evolve. And if we can bring this down to just a few people, it's harder for the virus to generate new variants and so on. If we have still millions of people that aren't, well, then there is a good chance that new variants will emerge. And so it's hard to predict right now what the future will look like. I mean, I tell you, being in Saskatchewan in July, we lifted our restrictions. I took my kids camping. I thought that was the end of the pandemic. They're going back on the ice, they're playing hockey, all these things, right? We're all excited about this, that we're over. But then you look down south and you start to look around a little bit, and it seems like the numbers are going up instead of going down. And they're going up because we allow the virus to continue to spread.
If you were king of the world, in addition to being a brilliant scientist, would you make it mandatory? Would you say, look, no more fooling around, we just have to do this?
Yes.
That's a pretty simple answer. Just yes, make it mandatory.
Yes.
And in the short term, if you don't have proof of vaccine, then you will be prevented from going places publicly, whether it's football games or school or whatever it may be. You'd be that tough.
Yes.
Pretty
And I
direct.
think, I mean, this is a political discussion, but I think
No, I understand.
this is where a country like Canada can be a leader, right? I mean, why not sometimes be a leader in something and say, we're making it mandatory. I understand there is reasons why people don't want to. And there is, of course, there is people that have allergies and people that can't be vaccinated and all those exemptions. So I'm not saying mandatory and force everybody to do it.
Yeah.
But for those who don't have any medical or any religious or cultural reason that really prevent them from taking a vaccine, I would make it mandatory. Yes.
That's not likely to happen when we're in the middle of an election campaign for
No,
all
it's
the
not.
obvious reasons.
I know, but you asked me what I would do,
No,
right?
no,
So,
that's exactly why I asked you, because you're the scientist. There's also news now that Moderna is going to set up shop in Canada somewhere. Most people are assuming Quebec, but they don't know. Is that good news? I mean, you have been working away, struggling to get the funding and the facilities for you to do your job, and then these big companies kind of swan in. Do you have to just say, well, it's good news anyway, or how do you look at that?
yeah, so I look at that slightly different. So I think for Canada, I think we realized that maybe we didn't have the capacity that we needed as a country. And so I think what is currently ongoing, what the government is doing at the moment is really rebuilding that capacity. And so what we need is a mix of a number of things. So we need the commercial manufacturers that have the capacity, like Sanofi, for example, or Moderna now, that have the capacity to produce vaccines for the world. But then we also need, on the other hand, the research, the infrastructure that facilitates quick development of these vaccines, right? So Moderna bought or licensed their technology from the NIH, from a research organization, right? Pfizer got their vaccine from a small research organization, and it was supported by a Canadian organization, right? AstraZeneca bought their vaccine and licensed it from the Jenner Institute, a research organization at the University of Oxford. So all the big guys are acquiring the technologies from research organizations like our own, right? And even for our COVID vaccine, we're working on identifying a commercial partner who eventually will take it over and commercially manufacture it. So what in my mind the country needs is a combination of all of these things. We need to have the research organizations like VIDO and a few others in the country that have the capacity and the infrastructure to rapidly respond to any new disease, whether it's human or animals. And rapidly respond, I mean, not to, ask for funding when a disease is there, then start looking for the people that we can recruit and train them for 6 months and eventually have them working at the lab. They need to be there and ready and fully trained so that when the fire breaks out, we have the firemen that can go and fight the fire, not half a year later. So that's number one. We need these research centers that have the research capacity, which also means we need to train students. We need to build the next generation of researchers so that Canada never finds itself in a situation again where we don't have enough capacity and need to rely on other countries to do the job for us. But then there comes this next phase to it, and that is taking now the early technologies into clinical development. And this is where VIDO is now building an in-house manufacturing facility. It allows us to quickly take our discovery that was made in the lab, manufacture it to the highest standard for clinical grade material, get it into the clinical trials. And then we demonstrate, just as we do now, that the vaccine works well, is safe, and so on, and then we can license it to a commercial partner. So as a country, we need all of those together. We need the early discovery research. We need to have the capacity to take university discovery into first or early development and manufacturing. And then we need also the big guys later on to make billions of doses for Canada and the world. So it has to be a combination. And Moderna just fits right in there in my mind, in that they are bringing access to the RNA technology, which may or may not be the future, to Canada. And so I think it's a good thing for Canada that they're planning to set up shop here. I wish it wasn't Quebec. I wish it would be Saskatchewan where they're coming to.
Well, and there'd be some argument for that closer to the research, but it's interesting you say that mRNA may or may not be the future. It may be more what you're working on, which is the slow and steady.
Well, I think, again, we will see a combination, right? So again, in my mind, you never in life just put all your money on one horse, right? And so we always had different technologies, and we have for the last 100 years, right? And so even with COVID, we have seen protein vaccines. Novavax is making one, Sanofi is making one, VIDO is making one. Internationally, there's over 40 organizations that are making protein vaccines right now. We have seen the viral vectors like the Johnson & Johnson, the AstraZeneca, and so on. And again, CanSino in China, there's around the world, there's lots of viral vectors, and we're seeing RNA vaccines. So what we really want is to have different technologies, because what we need to have is how would you say this? Like almost like we call it precision medicine. You want to have the right vaccine technology for the right individual, right? So some like babies or the elderly will want a different technology. If you want to go and vaccinate in rural Saskatchewan or up in Canada's north, an RNA technology is very, very difficult because it requires -80 freezers and all these things, right? So a protein subunit, much easier to store and transport and easier to handle, easy to take to northern Saskatchewan, easy to take to northern Canada, easy to take in the middle of Africa. So really, it all, like, it's more than just one technology that we need. We need whatever the best technology is for that circumstance, whether it's a global or regional country where, it's hard to get to people, or whether it's a certain age group, or whether it's a certain, cultural group. Like, we want more than one technology.
More than one tool to deal with. So you kind of envision a day, which is whether it's this pandemic or one that will inevitably come at some other point, more specific targeted tools, so that I would get one kind of vaccine given my health, age, gender, whatever it may be, and you might get another.
Yes, and it's clear that that's where the whole field before the pandemic was moving to, and even now will continue to move to. We will have eventually linked with and like, this is my prediction, in a few years, not tomorrow, but we will have all that information on you, so that your doctor will say to you, this is the best vaccine I would recommend given your current situation. And for your kids, that might be a very, very different vaccine. It might mean, are you traveling a lot? Are you, is your immune response, are you affected by other things? Are you reaching a certain age group where we want to shift the immune response back a little bit in the way it responds? So we use different components in the vaccines. Are you pregnant? Are you, an expecting mother? Well, then your vaccine would look very, very different than what I would give to a teenager. And that one would look very, very different than what I give to an 85-year-old. So the future will be that we have these vaccines that are really much more specific to the population in which we use them in.
We are so thankful that you are there doing what you do every day to get us ready for that, because it feels like we've been using some pretty blunt instruments and you want to make them sharper.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very well said.
Great to talk to you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks again, Dr. Volker Gerdts, Director and CEO at VIDO, Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Thanks for joining us today.